The cafe was settled into a gentle hush on a less-traveled corner, the kind of secluded spot that required a deliberate turn off the main road, a haven for those who had time to waste, not those seeking speed. Soft jazz notes drifted lazily from unseen speakers, and the air inside was thick and comforting, scented with the deep, earthy roast of quality coffee beans mingling with the yeasty warmth of proofing dough. Late afternoon sun spilled dramatically through the expansive plate glass windows, stretching long, golden fingers across the well-worn wooden tables and the deeply scuffed floorboards, marking time as it had likely done for decades. Near the shadowy sanctuary of the back wall, a solitary man occupied a small table. He wore unassuming clothes, dark, tailored, devoid of logos or flash, designed not just to hide, but to blend completely into the urban landscape. His presence was quiet. His power, if he possessed any, was entirely unannounced. He traveled precisely to find these pockets of anonymity, moments where he could shed the weight of his reality and simply observe the currents of ordinary existence flowing around him. He ordered a black coffee and a modest pastry, speaking to the counter staff with an almost deferential politeness before returning to his seat. From his vantage point, he watched the operation of the cafe revolve around the smooth, almost automatic movements of a young waitress. He noticed how this small world functioned. The rhythmic clink of porcelain, the intimate murmurs of a couple across the room, the strained, heavy-lidded focus of a tired-looking writer tapping away at a laptop. The waitress navigated the crowded aisles with focused efficiency. She wrote orders in a concise shorthand, offered smiles when required, and paused with genuine patience when customers needed to speak. Her smile was a carefully maintained performance, not insincere, but undoubtedly forged in the fires of necessity, a protective layer worn by those accustomed to prioritizing the needs of others over their own fragility. Every action was precise. When a patron sharply complained about a mistake, she offered a swift, hushed apology and rectified the issue without the slightest argument. When a spoon slipped and hit the floor, she was kneeling to retrieve it before anyone else could react. She possessed the quiet desperation of someone who understood that any misstep, however small, might carry disproportionate consequences. The man registered these details effortlessly. Years of training had honed his perception, forcing him to see the minute data points others habitually overlooked. It was this trained scrutiny that had defined his success. He fundamentally believed that the smallest, most unguarded moments often narrated the most profound life stories. Eventually, the initial bustle faded. The aggressive lunch crowd dissipated, leaving behind only scattered patrons. The waitress checked the time on a mounted clock with a weary precision, then spoke a few hushed words to the barista. She untied her apron, a small ritual signifying detachment, and slipped out the back door. The man's gaze, trained to register subtle deviations, followed her. At first, the necessity for a break seemed entirely normal. But a few moments later, he caught a glimpse of her reflection in the narrow pane of the side window. She was pressed against the cold exterior wall in the alleyway, a sliver of forgotten space. Her posture was rigidly defensive, head bowed low. One hand held her phone while the other was pressed firmly against her face. She was weeping, yet utterly soundless. A private, concentrated storm of grief meant for no audience. Her body barely trembled, but the clarity of her distress was unmistakable. Tears fell, hitting the concrete, and she quickly scrubbed them away, guarding her sorrow even from the air itself. The man did not stare, but he did not look away. He observed her in the way one notices something vital, without conscious force. She leaned into the brickwork, attempting to steady her breathing, visibly struggling to regain control. Her lips moved subtly, as if she were reading a devastating message on her phone repeatedly. Whatever the content, the pain it inflicted was profound. Pedestrians drifted past the cafe without stopping, without noticing the hidden struggle barely yards away. Life carried on, indifferent. Inside, the cafe's routine persisted. Someone chuckled at a nearby table. Cup was set down too hard. The muted music played on. A tight, unfamiliar pressure settled in the man's chest. It was not the detached sympathy of a stranger, but a dense, familiar weight, the echo of his own past. He recognized the specific, agonizing solitude of that moment. He remembered standing in forgotten rooms or desolate corners, not crying out of weakness, but because the exhaustion of relentless self-reliance had finally overwhelmed the defenses. He remembered receiving words on paper that had not opened doors, but ruthlessly slammed them shut. He had learned then that the source of tears was often not frailty, but the crushing burden of being strong entirely alone. After a long pause, he stood, moving toward the counter with unhurried dignity. He did not act like a person of influence. He waited patiently for the attention of the remaining staff member. "Excuse me," he requested, his tone measured and courteous. "I hope you don't mind a quick question." The staff member nodded warily. "The young woman who just took a break outside," he continued, leaning in slightly to ensure discretion. "Is everything all right?" She seemed rather distressed. The staff member glanced toward the back door, then sighed quietly. "She's just taking her break. She'll be back shortly." "I understand," he replied, but she appeared quite upset. The staff member hesitated. Cafe workers are typically trained to maintain client confidentiality, but something about the man's gentle inquiry felt different. There was no intrusion, only genuine concern. "She's had a particularly rough week," the staff member confessed quietly. "To be honest, probably a hard year." The man nodded slowly. "I see. That's truly all I can share," the staff member added, clearly uncomfortable revealing more. "That is sufficient," the man said. "Thank you." He returned to his table, but did not immediately touch his coffee. His eyes remained fixed on the back door. Outside, the waitress wiped her face one last time and inhaled deeply. She slipped the phone into her pocket, pressed her palms together, and held herself still for a few seconds, consolidating her shattered composure. When she finally straightened, her face was weary but resolute. She slipped back through the door. The transition was immediate and stark, a professional mask snapping back into place. The tension left her shoulders, replaced by that practiced, controlled ease. The traces of pain vanished, substituted by the familiar, gentle smile that served as her uniform. She efficiently retied her apron. It's not a final confirmation of her return to duty. The man felt a sharp, immediate surge of respect. It takes an extraordinary form of courage to bear profound personal pain and still prioritize showing up for others. She approached his table a few minutes later. "Is everything satisfactory with your order?" she asked automatically. "Yes," he confirmed. "Thank you." Their eyes briefly met. Hers were slightly puffy at the edges, a detail she attempted to conceal. His were steady, deeply thoughtful. She offered her practiced smile once more and moved on. He finished his coffee slowly. When he finally rose to depart, he left a generous stack of bills beneath the empty coffee cup, a sum significantly beyond customary, yet calculated precisely to avoid extravagance or spectacle. It was a gesture meant not for thanks, but for quiet recognition. As he walked toward the exit, he paused, turning back toward the counter. "One last thing," he added, turning back to the counter staff. "Yes," the staff member replied. "That young woman. She is exceptionally diligent," he said simply. "You should know how fortunate you are to have her here." The staff member offered a faint, acknowledging smile. "We know." The man nodded and stepped outside. The street air felt cooler now. He looked up at the pale, wide sky and exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He could have walked away, most people certainly would have. He could have rationalized that the world was full of people quietly weeping on their breaks, and that this was absolutely none of his concern. A single, unseen moment of despair doesn't alter a life. Yet, something profound had already shifted within him. As he walked down the street, his thoughts remained fixed on the waitress. The way she had clutched her phone as if it contained her entire future, the silent devastation of her tears, as if her pain didn't merit a sound. He had learned over the years that money alone was a blunt and often ineffective instrument. But he had also learned that a carefully chosen intervention, timed perfectly, possessed the power to reroute the entire trajectory of a human life. By the time he reached the end of the block, the nascent form of a decision was solidifying. It wasn't a tactical blueprint yet, just a powerful internal conviction that this moment had not been random, that it had implicitly demanded something of him. He stopped, turned back, and looked one last time at the cafe's door. Inside, the waitress was already taking a new order, nodding attentively as the customer spoke, her pen gliding across her pad. She had no idea that her quiet tears had been observed, and she certainly couldn't suspect that her life was about to pivot in a direction she had long since abandoned hope for. The man didn't rush back to his hotel. Instead, he walked slowly, allowing the mundane sounds of the city to settle around him. The hurried pace of parents with their children, the meticulous organization of shopkeepers, the sharp bark of a territorial dog. Life was relentlessly ordinary, but the image of the young woman, her small frame trembling outside, the silent weeping, refused to fade. He remembered the manager's simple phrase, "She's had a hard year." The words, though brief, carried the weight of crushing, unseen burdens. He could visualize the stress she managed, the bills, the endless responsibilities, perhaps family dependence. He, too, had known those moments where the world demanded exponential effort when the reserves were long depleted, with no safety net to turn to. The memory brought a familiar tightness to his chest. He did not know her, yet through shared history he felt an immediate protective concern. The following morning, he found himself drawn back to the cafe. He arrived just as the morning light, pale and cool, filtered through the windows, turning the tables golden. She was already present, apron tied, moving in the diffused morning light, serving the early rush with the same meticulous, weary grace. Today she remained entirely inside. Perhaps she had already claimed all the breaks she could afford, or perhaps she was simply too determined to stop. He stayed for hours, observing the rhythm of her work, the efficiency in taking orders, the care with which she delivered warm pastries. It was not the task itself that made her remarkable, but the determined quality of her movement despite the invisible anchor weighing her down. Curiosity, now infused with definite concern, drove him to approach the manager again. This time, his insistence was softer, more nuanced, merely seeking context. The manager, still hesitant, finally relented. "She carries a tremendous load," he finally said. "Long hours, family responsibilities. And there was a chance she had to sacrifice years ago." The man leaned in, his interest now acute. "An opportunity?" he asked. The manager glanced toward the young waitress as she moved between tables, ensuring their discussion remained discreet. "A major international residency program," he confirmed. "Something connected to Paris." She had secured the acceptance years ago, but circumstances, lack of funds, family obligations, forced her to let the dream die right there. "She's been working here ever since." The man remained silent for a long moment, picturing the city of lights, the center of art and culture she had dreamed of, and the stark reality of her current existence, serving coffee and smiling through exhaustion. He recalled his own early struggles, the risks, the sacrifices, the sheer unfairness of doors that closed simply due to circumstance. This young woman's story was a painful mirror of potential locked away, the ache of dreams postponed. He considered his next move. While financial assistance was essential, money alone would be a crude solution. She did not require a handout. She required agency and the opportunity to reclaim that stolen possibility, to experience the world she had only imagined. He returned to the cafe several times that week, maintaining his quiet vigil. He never initiated direct conversation, seeking only to observe without alarming her. He noted the small, telling habits. The way she tucked stray hair behind her ears when concentrating, the low, gentle voice she used with elderly customers, the fleeting, genuine laugh when a child dropped a pastry. Each observation solidified his respect for her resilience and quiet integrity. On the fourth day, he scheduled a private discussion with the manager. "I want to help her," he stated, cutting straight to the point. "Not in a way that creates a spectacle or embarrasses her. I simply want to make a long-deferred opportunity possible." The manager nodded, understanding the delicate nature of the request. She's not looking for attention. She deserves it, though. Whatever you decide, handle it carefully. She is sensitive despite her strength. If she feels pressure, she will shut down completely. The man listened intently. He was dedicated to proceeding with dignity and respect. The offer had to be hers to accept or decline, free of external obligation. He was determined that this act should not feel like him scripting her life, but rather him offering the pen back to her. He began making quiet arrangements, contacting a small, trusted circle of colleagues and assistants, keeping the details highly compartmentalized. Logistics needed to be flawless. Above all, he needed confirmation that she would feel empowered to take the step when the moment arrived. That afternoon, he watched her again. She was busy, her movements graceful but efficient. He noticed the constant, subtle strain. The small rubs of her neck when she thought no one was looking, the constant shift of weight from foot to foot, as if carrying more than just her physical body. She showed up every day. She offered her best to people who barely registered her existence. This was more than dedication. It was profound courage. Late that evening, he walked back to the closed cafe, stopping outside the darkened windows. In the silence, he imagined her reading her phone, visualizing Paris, a life just out of reach. He imagined the tangible feeling of holding a travel ticket, of finally unlocking a door closed years ago. He allowed the idea to crystallize. How could he offer this chance meaningfully, respectfully, without stripping her of her dignity? Over the next few days, the planning continued. Every detail mattered. He had to ensure that she would feel safe, supported, and completely free to make her own decision. It was about her, her future, her choice. Then, one afternoon, as she took another quick break outside, he observed her from a distance. She leaned against the wall, phone in hand, just as before. But this time, the planning, the logistics, and the understanding of her struggle converged into a single, undeniable conclusion. She deserved more than a glimpse of hope. She deserved a chance to breathe, to explore, to live the moment she had quietly guarded in her heart. He made a decision, not sudden, but deliberate, born of careful observation and empathy. He would find a way to offer her that opportunity, to turn a moment of silent despair into a doorway of possibility. He did not know how she would react, or if she would accept. He only knew she deserved to be seen, recognized, and given a chance rooted not in pity, but in belief. That night, he returned to his hotel and finalized the preparations. Plans were meticulously drawn, every contingency covered. There would be no rushing, no dramatic presentation, just the quiet intention to create a life-altering moment. Sitting by the window, looking out at the city, he thought of her tired eyes, her gentle smile, and the years of quiet kindness she had offered without complaint. He thought of the door that had closed on her long ago, and wondered what it would feel like to open it again, slowly and respectfully, allowing her to step through if she wished. He knew one thing for certain. The world was filled with such people, working hard, dreaming quietly, and being overlooked. Sometimes all it took was a single act of recognition, a moment of care, to set a life onto a new, entirely different path. He wanted to be that moment for her. The week passed. The man maintained his own routines, but his thoughts continuously returned to the cafe. He wondered about her early mornings, how she began her shift before sunrise, and how she managed to wear that polite smile while carrying such invisible weight. He felt an unusual sense of closeness through mere observation, the acknowledgement that being truly seen can, in itself, change everything. One morning, he decided it was time. He contacted the manager, politely requesting a moment of private conversation with the waitress. The manager remained cautious. "She is very independent," he warned. "She doesn't like being singled out, and she is extremely protective of her privacy." "I understand," the man replied. "I have no intention of pressuring or embarrassing her. I simply wish to offer her something, if she chooses to listen." The manager agreed to the arrangement, but stressed, "It must feel safe for her. She needs to understand that this is her decision alone." The arrangement was made discreetly. The manager informed the waitress that a customer wished to speak with her briefly after her shift ended. Assuming it was likely a delayed complaint or a routine matter, she felt a small wave of anxiety. She had learned to be wary of strangers, especially those who seemed to notice her too much. When her shift concluded, she was led to a small, quiet office at the back of the cafe. The room was warm and private. The man was waiting inside, standing calmly by the window. He offered a slight nod, making no attempt at an overly bright smile or booming speech, aiming to convey respect, not authority. "Hello," he said gently. "I hope I haven't interrupted your plans. Please have a seat if you like." She sat down slowly, unsure, her hands resting tightly in her lap. She studied him, ordinary, calm, unassuming, yet his eyes held a profound attention. They carried no judgment, no demand, only observation, which surprisingly eased her tension slightly. "I know this may seem extremely strange," he began. "We haven't met. I don't wish to frighten you. I simply wanted to say something. I noticed you the other day outside, and I could sense you were struggling. I also took the liberty of learning a very small detail about your story, if that's permissible." She blinked in surprise. She had not anticipated him knowing anything personal. Her mind raced, wondering how much he had witnessed, but she remained silent. "I learned," he continued carefully, "that you had an opportunity years ago, something important, connected to Paris, and that you couldn't go. Life made it difficult. Responsibilities, circumstances, it happens." He let the words settle, his tone completely neutral, yet recognizing the gravity of the missed opportunity. "And I can imagine that shadow of regret still weighs on you sometimes." Her throat tightened slightly, a physical response to the sudden, unexpected acknowledgement. No one had spoken about it in years. She had diligently sealed away the memory, burying the sharp disappointment deep inside the core of her being, convincing herself that the practical demands of her life were more important, pretending the dream didn't matter, assuring herself that there would eventually be other, safer opportunities. And yet, hearing someone else articulate that failure aloud, the way he said it, not with pity, but with simple, quiet understanding, stirred something vital and painful within her. She started to speak, then stopped, the sheer volume of suppressed emotion momentarily trapping the words in her chest. She didn't know what to say. He gave her a small, patient smile, a gesture free of pressure. "You don't have to say anything. I don't want you to feel pressured to explain or rationalize. I only want to offer something that might seem impossibly sudden, perhaps even unbelievable, but it is deeply real. I would like to give you the chance to go to Paris, to finally experience the opportunity you missed, to reclaim that moment, even if only for a short time. Only if you want to, only if it feels profoundly right for you." Her mind spun, struggling to reconcile the reality of her life with the magnitude of the offer. She stared at him, trying to grasp the underlying motive. Why would you do that?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a breath. "Because sometimes," he said, his gaze steady and sincere, "people are given doors that they cannot open due to constraints outside their control. And if you have the chance to open it later, safely and fully, why not take it? You deserve to see the world you imagined, not just the backdrop of a forgotten dream, but the reality of a global city. You deserve to explore, to feel that moment fully, without worry or financial fear. No one should have to wait forever for their dreams, especially when the moment to seize them can be made safe and real." Her eyes filled instantly with a complex mixture of disbelief, fear, and a terrifying, potent hope. She had always imagined someone would notice her quiet ambition, perhaps a dedicated teacher, a supportive mentor, or a forward-thinking family member, but never a stranger. And yet, here was a person offering the impossible, not as a cold act of charity, but as a genuine act of belief in her worth. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, uncertainty flooding her. "I don't know. It's just I've never done anything like this before. I wouldn't even know where to start the planning." "That's okay," he said gently, confirming her every fear while dismissing them. "You don't have to start. I will handle every single logistical detail. All you need to do is make the decision. Do you want to go? The trip, the complicated arrangements, the detailed plans, they are all prepared and waiting. If you say yes, you simply need to step through the door I've opened. If not, nothing changes here. Your life continues exactly as it is now. She thought about it, running through the implications. The idea felt like a fragile, luminous dream suspended just out of reach. Paris, the cobbled streets she had pored over in library books, the art, the history, the small, hidden cafes, the evocative sounds, the smells of distant possibility. She had pictured it countless times while mindlessly scrubbing dishes, wiping down sticky counters, or resting her exhausted head on a pillow after a double shift. And now it wasn't a fantasy, it was real. But it's so sudden, she whispered, anxiety tracing the outline of her mouth. I've never traveled alone. I've never done anything remotely like this. Then let it be the adventure you need, he said softly, leaning forward just slightly. No one expects you to do it perfectly. No one expects you to drastically change your life overnight. It's just a chance to see, to feel, to explore a world waiting for you. You can return whenever you wish. Nothing is permanent or binding. You control the pace. You control the choice. She thought about the four walls of her small apartment, the bills stacked neatly on the chipped counter, the job that relentlessly demanded all of her physical and emotional energy, the multitude of responsibilities she could not, under any circumstances, ignore. And yet, her heart remembered the long-ago dream, the one she had carefully tucked away for the sake of survival, the one that had never truly left, even when it had been forced into silence. What if I say yes and I can't manage it? What if I get there and I fail? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, revealing the core of her fear. Then I will be there, he said meaningfully, his statement an assurance of structure and safety. Not with you physically, but embedded in every meticulous plan I've made. You will be utterly safe. You will have continuous support. And if it's genuinely too much, you come home. There is no failure in trying something courageous. Only courage itself. She stared down at her hands, turning them over slowly, recognizing the calluses earned through years of labor. The thought of trying, of failing visibly terrified her. But the thought of never trying again, of letting the chance evaporate, was suddenly heavier, an unbearable weight of future regret. The dream of Paris, the city she had imagined with such intensity, made her heart ache. The quiet tears that had come during breaks, the silent frustration, the emotional weight she carried, they all felt valid, important, worthy of recognition in this single moment. She looked back up. The man's calm eyes met hers, patient, kind, completely free of expectation. And in that crucial moment, she felt an internal shift. A small, quiet spark of defiant hope flickered deep inside her chest, warm and unexpected. Okay, she said softly, hearing the momentous word leave her lips. I'll do it. He smiled. A small, genuine, and deeply satisfying smile. Then it settled. You only need to trust yourself from here. Everything else will be taken care of. After finalizing a few more discreet details regarding logistics and emergency contact, he quietly left the room, giving her the space and solitude to process the enormity of what had just transpired. She sat alone for a few stunned minutes, trying to absorb the reality of the commitment she had just made. Her mind raced with practical, mundane questions. How would she pack? What were the essential items she should bring? What if she got genuinely scared being so far from everything familiar? But beneath the swirling tide of doubt, a tiny, exhilarating thrill rose, the kind that ignites when a long-held, seemingly impossible dream suddenly feels within palpable reach. When she finally returned to the cafe floor, her steps felt noticeably lighter, though she consciously tried not to display the internal earthquake. She served the remaining customers with her usual practiced grace and efficiency, but her mind was elsewhere, already imagining the precise texture of the streets of Paris, the vast art museums, the intimate cafes, the unfamiliar sound of a language she barely knew, and the intoxicating freedom to explore something she had only ever imagined in solitude. The manager noticed an immediate, subtle change in her demeanor. You look different today, he said quietly, observing her from across the counter. She smiled faintly, a secretive, inward expression. "I'm just thinking about some things," she said, not yet ready to explain the absolute impossibility of her next few days. The man who had set the opportunity in motion watched her from a distance for a moment longer, unseen by her. He felt a quiet satisfaction, devoid of pride, but filled with a deep, profound calm. The seed had been planted. A doorway had been opened. She would walk through it entirely on her own terms, but he had helped make the initial choice possible. That, he thought, was the most anyone could hope to achieve for another person. That night, she sat rigidly on her small, familiar bed, staring at the travel documents that had been arranged to be delivered with perfect discretion. Flight tickets, precise accommodation details, a list of curated suggestions for places to see, and encouraging notes written in careful, elegant script. Each piece of paper was a tangible reminder. This was real. She could go. She could choose this life. She thought of her parents, her friends, her rigid life here. There was fear, sharp and recognizable, of leaving everything familiar behind. Fear of the profound unknown. But there was also something immensely stronger. A sudden, urgent sense that this was a moment she had been waiting for without even realizing it. A chance to step irrevocably beyond her self-imposed limitations, to feel alive in a complex way she had only ever imagined in the privacy of her mind. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to fully imagine the city. The narrow streets, the quiet parks, the sound of diverse voices speaking another language, the irresistible smell of fresh bread and rich coffee in the morning air. And for the first time in a very long time, she allowed herself to believe it was genuinely possible. The decision had been made. The door had opened, and now she would take the first terrifying step. The morning of her departure arrived quietly, veiled in the soft gray light of pre-dawn. She woke early, even before the sun had fully lifted above the horizon, her heart pounding relentlessly with a potent mixture of raw excitement and deep-seated nerves. The small apartment felt achingly familiar and comforting. Yet, it also felt strangely smaller somehow, as if the world outside its walls was suddenly wider, louder, and explosively full of possibility. She packed slowly, deliberately, checking each item twice. Sensible clothes, essential toiletries, and the worn notebook she had used for years to record her most fleeting dreams and private thoughts. She wondered anxiously if she had packed enough, if she had done everything precisely right, but a small, insistent voice inside reminded her that it didn't have to be perfect. She only had to go. A sleek, black car arrived at her apartment building just after dawn. The driver, impeccably polite and discreet, silently helped her with the modest luggage. She noticed that nothing about this moment felt excessive or showy. It was simple, careful, intended only to make her feel perfectly comfortable and secure. She climbed into the car, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear alone, but from the breathtaking realization that her long-buried dream was finally, undeniably within reach. The ride to the airfield was quiet and reflective. She watched the streets pass by, noticing small, ordinary details she had been too preoccupied to see before. The way the morning light struck the rooftops, the children waiting patiently at a school crossing, the old baker opening his shop and filling the air with the scent of yeast. Everything felt ordinary and simultaneously extraordinary. Her thoughts drifted inevitably to the man who had orchestrated this entire event. She had never spoken to him much beyond that brief, life-altering meeting in the cafe's back room. Yet, through that single interaction, he had given her the courage to believe in herself again, a gift far greater than the trip itself. At the airfield, a sleek, twin-engine helicopter waited, quietly resting on the tarmac, its frame gleaming in the early light. She had never flown in a helicopter before, and the sight made her stomach flutter with a rush of nervous excitement. The pilot greeted her warmly and professionally, explaining the safety measures and reassuring her that everything was prepared for her comfort and security throughout the flight. She nodded, taking in every detail, feeling a strange, intoxicating mixture of disbelief and high anticipation. As she climbed aboard, she could hear the faint, low hum of the rotors beginning their slow, powerful spin. The moment felt intensely surreal. The familiar city she had walked and worked in for so long quickly shrank below her as the helicopter lifted smoothly into the sky. The streets, the buildings, and the familiar landmarks became a rapidly receding patchwork of color and light. She pressed her hands lightly against the window, utterly mesmerized by the view, feeling an acute sense of freedom she had never before experienced. The pilot spoke calmly, describing the flight path, but she barely registered his words. Her mind was already drifting ahead to the city waiting for her, to the Paris she had imagined countless times. She thought of the narrow, winding streets, the bustling cafes filled with the smell of fresh pastries, the quiet sanctity of the museums, the expansive parks, and the river she had only seen in glossy photographs. And she thought of herself, stepping finally into a world that had once seemed utterly unreachable. When the helicopter finally set down gently, she felt her knees go weak for a moment. She had arrived, yet the reality was still too much to grasp. The city stretched before her, a vibrant tapestry full of life, noise, and breathtaking possibility. She stepped out carefully, feeling the cool, unfamiliar morning air brush against her face. Taking in the foreign sounds, the rapid language she barely understood, and the pulsing energy of a place that had been a fixed dream for so long, she felt truly present. A guide, discreetly arranged by the man, greeted her politely. He spoke softly, giving her ample time to adjust to the sensory overload. He handed her a detailed map, suggested a few iconic areas to explore first, and assured her that every detail of her stay had been meticulously planned with her comfort and security paramount. She nodded, slightly overwhelmed, but profoundly grateful. She realized that everything had been taken care of, not just the travel and accommodation, but the unseen, critical details that mattered most. Safety, ease of movement, and the complete freedom to explore without financial worry. As she walked through the historic streets of Paris for the very first time, she felt her heart swell, a rush of emotion so intense it almost brought tears to her eyes. The city smelled distinctly of fresh bread, strong coffee, and the lingering scent of morning rain. Street musicians played softly on corners, and the animated chatter of people walking quickly to work or school filled the vibrant air. Cafes spilled onto the sidewalks, small tables arranged neatly with cups, saucers, and folded newspapers. Every detail was exactly as she had imagined, and yet it was infinitely more vivid, more real, more alive than she could possibly have dreamed. She wandered slowly, deliberately, not wanting to miss a single, fleeting moment. Each street, each grand building, each small, intimate cafe felt like an important personal discovery. The air was noticeably cooler than her home city, the lights softer, and the rhythmic sounds somehow musical. She found herself smiling quietly to herself, a deep, genuine smile that originated from the core of her being, unforced and honest. For the first time in years, she felt a strong sense of belonging, not simply because she had physically arrived somewhere new, but because she had arrived at a moment she had longed for with her entire heart. Days passed in a beautiful blur of wonder and intense exploration. She visited the famous museums, walking quietly past priceless paintings she had only ever seen reproduced in small library books. She sat for long stretches in cafes, nursing a cup of coffee and observing the people around her, slowly learning the unique rhythm of their lives. She walked along the Seine River, marveling at the ancient bridges and the liquid reflections, the sunlight dancing magically on the moving water. She tasted pastries that melted sensationally in her mouth, the flavors richer and more complex than she had ever imagined. She took countless photos, wrote detailed notes in her worn notebook, and consciously allowed herself to simply be. In the evenings, she spent time reflecting deeply on her journey. She thought about the man who had granted her this impossible opportunity, about the careful, respectful planning, and the quiet belief in her potential that lay beneath it all. She realized that what he had given her was far more than just a trip. It was a profound reminder that she was seen, that her long-held dreams mattered, that the world could still offer moments of unexpected kindness and staggering possibility, even when life seemed impossibly heavy. She also began to think about herself differently. She noticed her confidence growing, small at first, but absolutely undeniable. She walked taller, spoke with greater ease and assurance, and allowed herself to notice beauty without the guilt of distraction. She had always been meticulous about survival, about working, about providing stability. But here, she was learning the art of living, to experience joy and wonder without apology, to embrace a moment that was entirely and selfishly hers. One afternoon, as she sat at a cafe overlooking a busy, bustling square, she reflected on her life back home. The ingrained routines, the crushing responsibilities, the quiet, persistent sacrifices she had made. She understood them better now, not merely as burdens, but as essential parts of her story that had rigorously prepared her to fully appreciate this extraordinary gift. She realized that her dedication to work, her quiet perseverance, and even her frustrated, quiet tears had all contributed to making her ready for this moment. And yet, she knew this trip was only the very beginning. Paris was not a magical solution to every problem or a quick fix to every struggle. It was a catalyst, a moment, a chance, a brightly lit doorway. What she learned here, the profound sense of freedom she felt, the confidence she discovered, could follow her back home. She could carry the possibility of exploration, the powerful understanding that she deserved experiences beyond her immediate struggles, and the quiet belief that life could always offer surprises she had never dared to expect. The helicopter ride back to her temporary lodging that evening gave her essential time to synthesize her thoughts. The city lights stretched out beneath her as the sun finally set, reflecting brilliantly in the water and across the streets. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel a wave of gratitude, not just for the journey, but for the person who had noticed her, who had believed in her potential when the rest of the world had seemed utterly indifferent. She understood that this opportunity had been a deep act of trust, not trust in her skills or talents alone, but a trust in her fundamental humanity, and her capacity to embrace possibility and grow profoundly from it. By the time she returned to her hotel, she felt a quiet, irreversible transformation within herself. She had seen the world she had dreamed of. She had allowed herself to hope again, fully and completely. And though her life back home would undeniably require the same responsibility and hard work, she now carried a powerful new perspective. She understood that dreams, even long postponed ones, could become real, that the world could surprise her with unexpected kindness and possibility, that she could take deliberate steps, however small, toward experiences she had once thought unreachable. That night, as she lay comfortably in bed, she wrote intensely in her notebook, carefully capturing the moments she was determined never to forget. The smell of fresh, warm bread, the lively chatter in the cafes, the gentle, spontaneous music of the streets, the warmth of the sunlight on her face. She wrote about the quiet courage it had taken to finally say yes, the joy she felt walking along streets she had long imagined, and the hope she knew she could carry forward. And she wrote a short, declarative note, not for anyone else to read, but for her own soul. I saw the world today and it saw me. I will not forget this. The trip had been more than a journey. It had been an awakening, a powerful reminder that life could hold moments of pure magic, of freedom, and of profound belief in one's potential. That even a life weighed down by responsibilities and struggle could still be touched by hope. She knew that the man who had made this possible would likely not remain present in her life, and she did not expect him to. The gift had been given quietly, respectfully, without any expectation of return. It was his unique way of saying that some doors should be opened, not for the recognition of the opener, but for the simple, transformative act of belief. And she was absolutely determined to honor that. As she fell asleep that night, the city outside humming softly with distant life, she allowed herself to dream again, not just of Paris, but of boundless possibility, of newly discovered courage, and of the expansive life she could build with the powerful lessons she had learned. She understood now that some crucial moments arrive not by random chance, but by the quiet, perceptive attention and care of someone who truly notices. And in noticing, the world can change. Just for a moment, just for her, and yet forever. The young woman returned home a few days later, her heart still full, saturated with the sights, sounds, and vibrant experiences of Paris. The familiar streets of her own city felt comforting, ordinary, but subtly different. She noticed small details she had overlooked for years. The way sunlight caught the corners of the buildings, the casual rhythm of people walking, the specific way the breeze smelled in the morning. Her physical home had not changed, but she had fundamentally changed. Life picked up immediately. Work at the cafe resumed its demanding pace. The same worn tables, the same standard orders, the same steady stream of customers. At first, it felt almost strange. Her daily routine, the hours she had learned to move through on weary autopilot, was suddenly infused with a new sense of perspective and appreciation. She carried herself differently. Her smile felt more genuine, less worn down by fatigue, more honest and engaged. She moved with a quiet, undeniable confidence, a subtle sense that she had just returned from somewhere extraordinary and could now carry that profound experience into every single day. The cafe staff immediately noticed the change. Her coworkers commented softly, asking if she had taken a restorative vacation. She smiled and nodded, careful not to share too much detail, but they could see it reflected in her eyes. A spark of joy, a sense of fresh discovery, a subtle glow of accomplishment and self-mastery. Even the manager, who had first helped arrange her meeting with the mysterious man, noticed the difference. "You seem lighter," he said one day while wiping down a counter. She nodded quietly, recognizing the truth of his observation. "I feel like I can breathe," she said softly. The memory of the man who had made the trip possible stayed with her, a quiet, guiding force. She thought about him often, not as someone she knew intimately, but as someone who had quietly, profoundly changed the course of her life with a single, powerful act of belief. He had seen her when others had not. He had noticed both her struggles and her intrinsic strength, and he had offered a radical chance without expectation, without pressure, without judgment. That realization stayed with her, quietly shaping how she viewed the world and her place within it. She understood now that kindness and focused attention, even from strangers, could have a permanent, lasting impact. Her dreams began to expand exponentially. Before, Paris had been a single, distant point of longing. Now, the world felt vastly bigger, full of possibilities she had not previously dared to imagine. She thought seriously about future travel, about learning new skills relevant to the world, about exploring other cities and countries. She thought about her life back home and how she could approach it with a fundamentally fresh perspective. She realized that while the responsibilities remained fixed, the way she carried them could change dramatically. She could now move through life with a pervasive sense of hope and genuine curiosity, not solely obligation. She began small. On her days off, she explored forgotten parts of the city she had never visited, treating them as if they were Parisian streets. She walked slowly through local parks, visited small, unknown galleries, and tried independent cafes she had previously overlooked. She met people with life stories vastly different from her own, and she listened intently, learning to value perspectives she had previously dismissed. The intense sense of wonder she had experienced in Paris did not disappear. It followed her home, gently reminding her that life could be beautiful and surprising in ordinary moments, not only in extraordinary ones. Her confidence grew steadily, too. She began to speak more openly, to express creative ideas at work she had previously kept guarded, to take initiative when challenges arose. Customers noticed her warmth, her attentiveness, and her quiet, resilient joy. She realized that the growth she had experienced abroad was not just about seeing a new city, but about discovering her own deep strength and capability. She had learned, critically, to trust herself. One evening after a particularly long shift, she sat quietly in the cafe's back room, reflecting on the long journey that had brought her to this exact moment. The vivid memory of the helicopter ride, the narrow streets of Paris, the lively cafes, the vast museums, and the quiet, breathtaking moments of awe filled her mind. She understood now that the trip had been an unmistakable turning point. Not just an experience, but a fundamental lesson. Life could indeed offer unexpected opportunities, and courage often meant saying yes firmly when the cautious heart whispered maybe. She thought of the man who had given her this chance. She never sought him out, never attempted to contact him. She realized that what he had done was meant to be private, respectful, and entirely without expectation. She was determined to honor that magnificent gift by living fully, by embracing the possibilities he had offered without seeking any recognition for herself. She would simply live. She promised herself that the most profound way to honor that extraordinary gift was to notice others too, to meet the world with the same quiet, careful attention she had received. She realized that small, seemingly insignificant acts of kindness, genuine belief, or simple presence could send powerful ripples through the lives of those around her, just as those acts had fundamentally transformed her own trajectory. The days blurred into weeks, maintaining the familiar rhythm of the city. She continued to work her shifts at the small cafe, but the counter no longer felt like the edge of a closed-off world. The outside, once distant and unreachable, now hummed with opportunity. She meticulously saved what little money she could, began the satisfying, challenging process of learning Italian, a language that felt like music, and started sketching out detailed itineraries for future travels she had previously been too timid even to daydream about. The initial spark of curiosity and quiet confidence ignited on those Parisian streets did not fade. It became a steady internal light, consistently guiding her choices and shaping her daily actions. One slow afternoon, as she poured coffee for a regular customer who was excitedly regaling her with stories of backpacking through Southeast Asia, she paused, smiling faintly to herself. She wasn't just thinking of her memories of Paris. She was realizing the true depth of the transformation. The act of actively exploring, of willingly stepping beyond the suffocating constraints of fear and the comfort of routine, had gifted her something far more enduring than scenic photographs or anecdotes. It had forged in her a renewed perspective, an unwavering resilience, and a palpable, sustainable hope for the future. She understood with crystal clarity that life was not merely a mechanical process of surviving the daily grind, but a profound, necessary obligation to notice and appreciate the fleeting, extraordinary moments that made existing worth living fully. This understanding naturally began to permeate her interactions. When a usually stoic coworker, Maria, visibly struggled with complex personal challenges, she didn't offer superficial advice. Instead, she listened, truly listened, offering silent support and sincere encouragement without a trace of judgment. When a certain regular customer appeared consistently weighed down by unspoken worries, she met their gaze, offered a warm smile, and made sure their order was exactly right. Small, silent reminders of how vital gestures of attention, genuine care, and basic human belief could fundamentally shift a person's day. She understood now that the kindness she had been given was not a debt to be repaid, but an inspiration that demanded she become more present, more acutely aware, and infinitely more compassionate in her everyday life. As time progressed, her self-reflection deepened. She no longer viewed herself solely through the narrow lens of a waitress defined by a uniform, rigid routine, and demanding responsibility. The woman she saw in the reflection was someone inherently capable, someone ready to explore the vastness of the world, eager to embrace unforeseen opportunities, and resolute in her ability to choose joy, even when it required effort. She had learned, through hard-won experience, that life was a tapestry woven with moments, some strikingly quiet, others undeniably extraordinary, but all requiring a measure of internal courage and unwavering trust. Crucially, she had discovered that even a single, solitary act of belief from another person could irrevocably shift the course of her life in ways that resonated deeply within her soul. Months later, as she walked through the familiar avenues of her own city, she paused before a small, sun-drenched street cafe she had passed thousands of times but never visited. She stopped dead, a visceral memory flooding her senses. The exact feeling of that first apprehensive yet thrilling walk through Paris. The low, resonant hum of the foreign streets, the mingled smells of coffee and ancient stone, the unfamiliar sounds of hurried conversation, and the quiet, breathless thrill of discovery. She smiled, realizing that the precious essence of that Parisian experience was not geographically bound. It could be discovered anywhere, provided she carried that new, expansive perspective. It was never just about places. she concluded, but about the profound commitment to noticing, truly appreciating, and embracing life with sustained attention and genuine care. The young woman's life did not undergo some sudden, dramatic, cinematic transformation. She still worked tirelessly, still wrestled with mounting responsibilities, and still encountered frustrating challenges. But she approached each new day differently. Her heart carried the vivid, cherished memory of Paris, the invaluable lesson of courage learned there, and the profound, grounding understanding that she was seen, she was valued, and she was capable of embracing boundless opportunity. This quiet, unshakable confidence infused every interaction, influenced every decision, and subtly transformed the very way she moved through the world. She often pondered how those small, foundational moments of attention, someone noticing her struggle, someone believing in her untried potential, could ripple outward, creating such monumental change. She realized she had been granted a truly rare gift, not just a temporary trip, but a foundational lesson in trust, courage, and the innate goodness of human kindness. She now understood that the world held infinite, beautiful surprises, sometimes delivered through the inexplicable generosity of strangers, and sometimes found through one's own quiet, powerful willingness to simply say, yes. As the weeks smoothly transitioned into months, she meticulously refined her plans. Plans to explore new cities, to master new professional skills, and to continue the crucial work of personal growth. She grasped that the journey to Paris had not been a fleeting escape from reality, but a pivotal doorway opening onto a much larger, more complex understanding of herself and her place in the world. She permanently carried the lesson of courage, the constant reminder that opportunity awaited her embrace, and the quiet, potent knowledge that even the simplest acts of attention could initiate lasting, profound change. And in her quiet moments of reflection, when she thought of the kind man who had truly noticed her, she felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude, not solely for the physical trip, but for the respect, the belief, and the careful attention that had made the entire transformation possible. She vowed that she would honor that singular gift by diligently noticing others, by consistently offering encouragement, and by living fully, driven by curiosity, compassion, and courage. Her life had not attained perfection. Challenges remained obstinate, and responsibilities still occasionally weighed heavily upon her shoulders. But she faced them with a fundamentally altered outlook, armed with the knowledge that possibility could genuinely exist even within the predictable framework of the ordinary. That dreams, however long deferred, could absolutely be realized. And that courage often meant nothing more complex than quietly saying yes to the unknown journey ahead. One calm evening, as she sat near her window, gazing out at the city lights beginning to bloom in the twilight, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Life is replete with doors. Some are expertly hidden, some are stubbornly closed by fear, and some are simply waiting for us to finally notice them. And sometimes, when someone truly sees you, genuinely believes in you, and bravely opens a door, your life changes forever." She smiled gently, feeling a deep, abiding sense of peace settle over her. She had seen the world she had yearned for, experienced its quiet wonder, and returned to her own life armed with a new, empowered understanding of herself and the profound possibilities swirling around her. She knew that the memory of this journey, the indelible lessons learned, and the enduring courage she had discovered would remain a vital, guiding force for the rest of her existence. And in that quiet moment, she arrived at an understanding both simple and profoundly meaningful. That life, even in its most ordinary, unremarked moments, possessed the capacity to be utterly extraordinary when it was truly seen, wholly believed in, and fully embraced with a courageous, open heart. She had been given a magnificent gift, and she would carry it forward, not merely as a fading memory, but as an essential, living, breathing part of her everyday reality. Her story, once narrowly limited by circumstance and expectation, had exponentially expanded. Her dreams, once indefinitely postponed, had been touched by the invigorating possibility of realization, and the world, in its quiet, unexpected generosity and shocking kindness, had powerfully reminded her that being seen, being believed in, and embracing courage could, indeed, change absolutely everything. For the first time in many years, she felt truly, undeniably free.